Welcome to the series What Jesus Meant. Hello, I'm happy to introduce you to the series of biblical messages by Dr. Balsan Thampu titled What Jesus Meant. As the title suggests, here's an attempt to unveil the deeper dimensions of Jesus' teachings. But being a Christian is not a requirement for viewing them. Jesus is presented here as the light of the world and not as the icon of a religion. Balsan is a voice heard with attention as a teacher, thinker, author, and preacher in Christian and secular contexts in India for over 4 decades. He teaches as one excited about the contemporary relevance of Jesus' spiritual vision. Through these video messages, he offers the fragrance of a fresh understanding of what it means to be Christian. This is a study series without academic rigors. For best results, viewers need to pursue the trail of thought to the end as a learning and unlearning experience. We hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the series What Jesus Meant, which is an attempt to go deeper into the meaning of what Jesus taught. Of late, we have been trying to understand the meaning of Jesus' saying that he is the truth, and also that the truth sets human beings free. And Jesus stated very clearly that setting people free is his core agenda. So we are examining a theme of profound significance, and we continue with our reflections on the liberating power of the truth that Jesus Christ is. As the truth, or as incarnate truth, Jesus insists that our inner condition determines our capacity for truth. This should be fairly obvious because there is a saying with which we are all familiar that what we see depends on where we stand, and that's a basic principle in behavioral psychology. But spirituality will go a step further and say what a person sees depends on who he is. So it is our inner condition that's decisive. Most people think that the world outside is all important, and if you adopt their perspective, you will come to a conclusion that you are a mere passive object, which is a plaything in the hands of irresistible forces playing out in the world, which is all the time controlling you. Now, Jesus, therefore, challenges that assumption, and in order to empower people to become truly who they can be, which is the goal of spiritual liberation, teaches very profoundly, very clearly, and persuasively that we need to mind our inner state. Let me give you a couple of instances so that it becomes very clear. Recall the parable of the 10 maidens that Jesus taught as part of a set of 3 parables that seek to give us an insight into the kingdom of God. Now, in that parable, the 10 maidens are divided into 2 categories. 5 of them have oil in their lamps, 5 of them don't have oil in their lamp. So the parable says that when the bridegroom came, and it was for the bridegroom that they were all waiting, the 5 maidens who had oil in their lamps were accepted into the felicity of being with the bridegroom, and the 5 who did not have oil in their lamp were rejected. Now, I would perhaps venture to suggest that the 5 maidens who did not have oil in the lamp did not even recognize that the bridegroom had come. They would have recognized the hurly-burly, the noise, the excitement in there, etc. Because if you have no oil in your lamp, what can you see? And because of their inner lacuna, they got rejected, and that made all the difference. Now think of another parable that Jesus taught, the parable of the sower. A man went out to sow the seed. Some of them fell on the wayside, some fell on shallow grounds, some fell among thorns and thistles. The seeds that fell on the wayside were eaten away by the birds. Nothing came of it. The seeds that fell on shallow ground sprouted, but because there was no depth, they withered away. The seeds that fell among thorns also sprouted, but they all got choked out of the difficult circumstances, the choking milieu in which they were. So, in all of this, it's very clear that Jesus wants to put or turn the searchlight into our inner life, because that is where things are decided. In contrast to this, religion becomes a domain of obsession with external surfaces, external appearances. Now, the external world is a world of conformity. Nobody in the religious context is really bothered about what the inner state of a person is. So long as you're conforming to the prescribed rituals and practices and make the payments that are required of you, all is well with you. No functionary, no religious functionary has the ability to look into the inner life of a worshipper and to find out whether or not he is in a position fit for worship. Even if he wants to, he does not have the ability, because the religious training, conditioning he has received keeps him confined to the world of appearances alone, and in that state he is completely unable to recognize the inner truths. So Jesus puts this particular reality in as sharp a formulation as you can imagine. He calls the priests of the times whited sepulchres. You can't possibly construct a metaphor more powerful than this. A metaphor that highlights the distinction between the external appearance and the inner reality. And from Jesus' perspective, this is a problem inherent in religion, and it is ineradicable from it. So in the external world, there is another interesting phenomenon. First of all, I said, as far as the external world is concerned, it is merely one of conformity. So long as you conform to what is required of you, everything is fine. Inwardly, you may be rotting and perishing. That's nobody's concern. You conform and you're all right. The second problem in the external world, which does not exist at all in the internal world, is that in the external world, everything can be substituted. There is nothing which cannot be substituted in the external world. For example, we have fake currency. People make counterfeit notes and coins. It is possible to substitute a genuine note or currency with fake currency, fake coins. So this happens all the time in this world. We are actually living in a world of counterfeits. Things are not what they appear to be. That's why I say that this is a world of counterfeits. I'm not trying to deride or downplay the importance of the world. In my previous messages, I emphasized the fact that God loves the world. After all, God created this world and He looked at it and found it good. And therefore, no Christian can actually dismiss the world as rubbish. That's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm saying is that the world that God created and found good has since then been deformed by human beings. And the reality has been distorted. Truth has been substituted with counterfeits. Human nature has a preference for the copy rather than the original, for appearance rather than truth, for bondage rather than freedom, so on and so forth. So, the original teachings of Jesus Christ have been deformed and they have been substituted with counterfeit interpretations, which is what inspires me to share these thoughts with you. For example, in the religious domain, it's always a danger, and the Bible makes us aware of it in a very, very powerful manner, There's always a danger in the zone of religion that God will be substituted with idols. That's why one of the Ten Commandments or prescribes that we should not do it, or orders us against it. You shall not make idols. You shall not worship idols. What is an idol? Idol is God as mere externality. There is nothing inside an idol. And Jesus puts it well when he says that idols have eyes but see not, hands but they do not work with them, legs but they do not move with them. Why? Because life is only within. The inside of an idol is hollow, there is no life in it, and therefore the idol of a god is nothing but the externality, the mere appearance of a god, but is not God. Also, in the external world, we are always vulnerable to manipulation by others. It doesn't matter which field it is, whether it is politics, whether it is religion, whether it is culture, whether it is economics, take any field of activity. You are sure to be manipulated by others. In fact, everybody in this world is manipulating everybody else, including parent-children relationship. It's incredible how cleverly and effectively children manipulate their parents, and parents on their part manipulate their children so that they conform to their wishes, expectations, and fantasies. So, third thing about religion is that because a religion generates and subsists on a world of illusions rather than the truth, religion is preferably practiced in or is largely confined to closed spaces. Now, this is a very important thing. Now, if you look at Jesus Christ, he did all his work in the open space. In the early phase, of course, he went to synagogues, he tried to address them, etc. But thereafter, you don't find Jesus in synagogues or the Jerusalem temple. He accomplishes his ministry out in the open. In contrast, this is amazing. In contrast, Christianity of our times, of the church-centered kind, is confined entirely within four walls. The priestly class is ill at home in the open space, in the wide world, and therefore they create this kind of apprehension. They infect believers with the fear, irrational fear, that if they have anything to do with the world, they would be polluted, completely overlooking the fact that life is lived not in church compounds, life is lived in the world out there. And therefore, part of the spiritual task must be to equip and empower people to live effectively as children of God in the wide world. And this is not what religion does. Religion tries to imprison people or limit people within confined or closed spaces because there's a reason for it. It's only in closed spaces that illusions can be generated and sustained. Religions depend very heavily on hypnotism. In order to understand religion, or in my effort to understand religion, I've tried to read a little bit on hypnotism, and therefore I'm making these observations based on the readings I have made on hypnotism. It's very interesting to look at rituals and rites, the liturgy that's practiced, including the sacrament, from the perspective of hypnotism. And that's not my main subject, I'm just flagging that as an issue. So, this preference for, and this addiction to closed spaces, enclosed spaces on the part of priests is a problem in itself. And this is a way to wall out realities. The realities of day-to-day life have to be walled out, excluded, so that a kind of rarefied ambience can be created within closed walls, within which the hypnotic power or a hypnotic effect of priestcraft can be exercised. So, therefore, it makes perfect sense that Jesus, who came to be the embodiment or incarnation of God's truth upon this earth, understood or prescribed for himself the liberation of humanity as his core agenda. He, in fact, identifies three cornerstones of his public ministry. That's to preach the good news to the poor, to open the eyes of the blind, and to set the captives free. You find that in the 18th verse of the 4th chapter of Luke's Gospel. So that's Jesus's manifesto. So it makes perfect sense in the light of what we have discovered so far, that Jesus, the truth, accepts or recognizes the liberation of human beings as one of his core mission agendas. Why? Because human beings voluntarily subject themselves to a world of illusion. In our unredeemed nature, if we have to choose between truth and illusion, what will we choose? Rest assured, a vast majority of people will choose illusion to truth. There's no doubt about it. And that is the reason why Jesus has to come with a very specific agenda of setting people free. And it is from our subjection to this world of illusions which we create for ourselves and create for each other. And therefore, all people on planet Earth are busy spinning illusions for themselves and for each other. Therefore, it makes sense that the world is choked with illusions. So, human beings are subject or are in bondage to this world of illusions. For example, the state, the political domain. You look at the theories of the origin of state, there is this presumption that the state is created for the welfare of human beings. In fact, democracy is defined as the government of the people, by the people, for the people. It's a sheer illusion. All governments are, whether irrespective of which name you call it, all governments are only for the elite, by the elite, for the elite. No doubt about it. It's an illusion that there is a government for all people that treats all people equally, all are equal in the eye of the law. These are illusions that we entertain. Sigmund Freud, the father of modern psychoanalysis, he said something very interesting about the state. He said, in simple, brutal words, he said, we create the state to oppress us. Worth remembering these words? We create the state to oppress us. And the domain of politics, if you have watched it carefully, you will see it's nothing but the theatre of illusions. Let me give you just one illustration from India. Prime Minister Modi, when he was announced as the prime ministerial candidate for Bharatiya Janata Party, which won the elections in 2014, proclaimed that if he is elected to power, he would ensure that every Indian becomes richer by 15 lakhs within 100 days. Everybody believed it. It was a beautiful illusion to sell to the people. That promise has not been fulfilled yet. And when a question was raised about it, the spokesperson of his party said, oh, it was a joke. Well, truth to tell, it was an illusion. And I think it was a brilliant stroke on the part of BJP to do this, because they understand the psychology of the people, that all people are eager to swallow as many illusions and as large illusions, gigantic illusions as possible. I can give you illustrations one after the other. There is no need to do it. Think of culture. How does culture work? Culture works only in terms of illusions. Why do you think there is so much emphasis on publicity, advertisement in the commercial world? Somebody says that a soap will give you smooth skin. You believe it. Some advertisement says that if you smoke this cigarette, you will live life king size. Another advertisement says that if you buy my products, your life will be good. You believe it. And suddenly you go to the market. Now, commercial advertising succeeds on psychology. The psychology is that human beings are eager to swallow illusions. And of course, religion. Look at religion start to finish from the perspective that we have been now sharing. That is, the creation of a world of illusion, then you will come to your own conclusion. And it is in this context that you can understand the deeper meanings and the wider scope of the teachings of Jesus Christ. And that is the reason why I'm making a very passing reference. A lot more needs to be said about each one of this, but suffices for our purpose to make a passing reference to these three dimensions now. So, common to all of that, whether it is politics, whether it is economics, whether it is religion, whether it is culture, whether it is education, whatever, common to all of that, all of them is that it is a huge trail of illusions all the way, all the way. And human beings are illusions consuming animals. Now, therefore, there is a corresponding incapacity to accept and live by the truth. I'm reminded of an instance from the Greek context. Demosthenes, the great orator, is reported to have ran through the streets of Athens with a torch burning, and then he was wandering around carrying this torch, and he was asked by people, and he was doing it in broad daylight, right, at noontime. So he was asked by people why he was doing it, because it made no sense to them. There was no need for the torch at that time because the sun was shining bright. So Demosthenes, in a very cool, collected manner, said, "I'm looking for an honest man in this dark world." Worth remembering, right? I'm looking for a good man in this wicked world. Why? How does this happen? It's because human beings reject truth in favor of illusions. This is a harsh reality. Certainly, this is the reality that Jesus Christ addressed, and a large part of his teaching becomes intelligible when you look at them from this perspective. So, therefore, we have now seen that Jesus Christ, as the truth, prioritized the liberation of human beings. Now it is time for us to examine what that liberation really involves. Now, this liberation that Jesus Christ offers involves, first of all, a radical change within us. And this is something I have dealt with in a previous video. Therefore, I will not repeat myself. I take that my friends who are participating in the series are already familiar with it. So there is the liberation of Jesus Christ operates fundamentally within us. As a result of that, as a result of this very radical transformation of our human nature in its fallenness, it becomes, from being in the fallen state, it begins to acquire the nature of Jesus Christ, the nature of God. As a consequence of this, what happens is our relationship to the world outside is redefined in an amazing and miraculous manner. This is the thing. Ultimately, everything boils down to one word: relationship. Tolstoy wrote a book on religion. And, he states explicitly, if I have to reduce the essence of religion to one word, I would say relationship. Of course, that relationship involves various dimensions: our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with our fellow human beings, our relationship with nature, our relationship with God, so on and so forth. Multiple facets of that relationship. But ultimately, it is relationship, just one word: relationship. We are today crippled in our capacity for relationship. By saying so, I mean, we of course have relationships, but our relationships are faulty. Our relationships are a medium of distortion. Our relationships never fulfill us. Our relationships are not founded on truth. Our relationships are not stable and deep, and therefore all our relationships are riddled with anxiety. From this state, we are delivered and given a profound capacity to relate to the external world in a very special way. And the wonder and beauty of it, I don't have the linguistic power to explain adequately or describe adequately. Let's take one or two examples. So I have said just now that The liberation that Jesus Christ offers involves a radical shift, a fundamental transformation of our inner nature. And as a consequence of that, our relationship or the way we relate to the world outside becomes very different. Now, let's take an example. Take the case of Zacchaeus. I will make frequent references to Zacchaeus for the reason that the case of Zacchaeus has multiple resonances, spiritual resonances, and therefore what happens to him lends itself readily to the illustration of many spiritual insights. But I'll not be repetitive. I will repeat the reference, but I'll not repeat the insight. So, now in the case of Zacchaeus, he related to the world in a particular manner when he was a tax collector. And how he related, we know. He became the richest man in the town, so that in itself tells you everything about how he related to the world. But once Jesus comes into his life, what happens? He becomes a new creation. And the lust to snatch from others is replaced by the joy of giving. He says, half my wealth I give to the poor. And if I've taken anything unlawfully from anyone, I'll return fivefold. For the first time in his life, Zacchaeus is able to relate to the world in the freedom of the Spirit. He is able to relate to the world in a godly manner. And that is the liberation that Jesus Christ offers. Jesus is not taking us to heaven immediately. Religion, especially Christianity, is busy preaching heaven. And that is done to camouflage this real spiritual agenda of setting people free. Because if people are really set free, if people are really liberated and they become a new creation, it will be bad news for the religious establishment. It will have to shut shop. And therefore, it makes good sense that this is kept deeply buried, completely hidden. So, in the case of Zacchaeus, there comes about a dramatic redefinition of the way he relates to the world around. Take another example. In the 5th chapter of Mark's Gospel, we come across the episode in which Jesus encounters a demoniac. The problem with the demoniac was that there was something seriously wrong with his relationship to himself. Of course, it also presupposes a huge socioeconomic problem. I will not go into the details thereof. So when Jesus comes into his life, and we read these beautiful words from Luke's account, when the people from the city of Gadara come and look at this man who was a terror, a living terror for them, they find him completely transformed. And we read like this: he was sitting at the feet of Jesus in his right mind. Beautiful, beautiful. He was sitting at the feet of Jesus in his right mind. That is the liberation that Jesus Christ offers. Because he is now in the right mind, he is now an emblem of peace. Look at the transformation. This is the meaning of the freedom that Jesus as the truth offers to us. As of now, we see everything through the eye of illusions. Fallen human nature cannot do otherwise. The only thing we can do, and this is the inevitable tragedy of human beings till they're liberated in a spiritual way, we can see only through the eye of illusion. And therefore, it is a rare chance that we see the truth of anything. Human life is full of and burdened with misunderstanding, misconceptions, misperceptions. Every time we have to be alert to the fact that we could be wide off the mark in perceiving the reality. And Jesus as the truth is deeply concerned about it. He is the light of the world because it's only in this light. The fundamental function of this light is to dispel the world of illusions. And that is because Jesus is the truth. Jesus is the light of truth. And therefore the impact of the light of truth will necessarily be that it dispels the world of illusions. So Jesus is our date with truth, and that truth sets us free. So, how does the truth set us free? We are actually the prisoners of what we perceive, what we apprehend, what we misunderstand. We are also the prisoners of our preconceptions, our stereotypes, our assumptions, our prejudices, our narrow, limited interests, the distorted way of reading reality. We are a prisoner of all of this. We are prisoners of all of this. When Jesus, the truth, comes into our life and his light begins to illumine the inner landscape of our personality, we begin to see everything as it really is. And Paul had an intuition of this. He said, now we see things darkly. Why is it that we see things darkly? Not because we don't have two beautiful and efficient eyes, not because there isn't enough physical light. We see things darkly because of the nature of limitations of our human nature. And that is that we have a predilection for illusions and distortions rather than truth. And therefore, we see things darkly. Darkly means as though we see in darkness. It is not night, there is no darkness around, but we see as though we are seeing in darkness. We fail to see everything in its true nature and its true value, true extent, true worth. So, we are therefore prisoners of what we see. That is something that all of us have to realize. And unfortunately, the religiosity that we practice keeps us pegged down to this world of illusions. It's all about seeing, all about seeing. And Jesus raises this issue. Read the 11th chapter of Matthew's Gospel. There he poses this most fundamental question. He asks them, in a somewhat rhetorical fashion, he asks, what did you go to the wilderness to see? Did you go to the wilderness to see the reeds swaying in the wind? Again, I ask you, what did you go to the wilderness to see? Did you go there to see rich men living in great affluence, luxury, and comfort? Again, I ask you, what did you go to the wilderness to see? To see a prophet? Then he says, yes, you need to see someone greater than the prophets that you have known. So, Jesus is acutely aware of what we see. And what we see depends on our inner state. And Jesus engages with that inner state. And therefore, the liberation that he offers is not just changes in the external conditions of life, but in the inner state of our existence. And therefore, it is liberation and healing in our personality, rather than making some changes and adjustments in the external circumstance. Unfortunately, because of our wrong religious conditioning, we assume that the duty of Jesus Christ is to control the external circumstances in our favor. The world must be controlled by Jesus Christ so that our interests are protected, our whims and fancies are fulfilled. This is a crude understanding of what Jesus Christ means or what Jesus Christ is supposed to do for us. This is an insult to the person and the mission of Jesus Christ. Jesus came to set the captives free, and therefore he came as the truth. And as the truth, he redefines who we are and therefore our relationship to the whole world. And therefore, the consequence is inevitable that we also look at the role of religion through these eyes from which the scales of illusion have fallen. Let me close on this beautiful image. I'm making a reference here to the transformation that happened to Saul, who was a very zealous Pharisee. He went round in his zeal to persecute Christians with authorization from the high priest. And while he was running about like a madcap persecuting Christians, he encounters Jesus on the road to Damascus. He becomes blind. It's beautiful. The symbolism is so powerful. He becomes blind. Blind, why? Because the way he was seeing till then and the way he has to see thereafter are mutually contradictory. The passage from one mode of seeing to the other mode of seeing, which is completely opposite, which is a polar opposite, cannot be an easy, smooth transition. It is a traumatic one. It's the trauma of the transition which is introduced through the idea of blindness, temporary blackout. It is similar to the conversion experience that Jonah experiences inside the whale's belly. Jonah ran away from God. Instead of going to Nineveh, he took the ship that was going to Tarshish, and with all the consequences that you are familiar with, I will not bore you with details. Jonah is thrown into the sea, then the sea becomes calm, but he is swallowed up by the whale, and he stays inside the inside the belly of the whale for 3 days, and there he prays and prays and prays. This is, I don't know to what extent this is scientifically true. That's not my concern. I don't rule out such possibilities, but I am not particularly bothered about it. I am profoundly excited about the symbolic meaning of that event. That is to say, every human being needs to go through this kind of experience, inside the whale's belly experience. When you go enter a state in which the world ceases to exist for you, and you literally die to yourself, and then when you emerge from that, by the grace of God, you become a completely new creation. So Jonah, the timid prophet, who, fearing ridicule and reprisal by the people of Nineveh because he knew how arrogant and intolerant they were, ran away to Tarshish, has to now undergo a complete reversal of his direction, and he has to shift from his self-will to the will of God. That transition is tremendous. It cannot be smooth, easy, and it can happen only in the most indescribable condition of being inside the whale's belly. It is not happy accommodation. I don't have to say this to you, right? That traumatic experience. I can say one thing to you. Every person in this world will go through once in his life a situation similar to what Jonah has undergone. Every person will find himself metaphorically inside a whale's belly. And much depends on what kind of internal strength that you gather. If you emerge from that with a new vision, or you get digested in the belly of the whale. So the theme that we are considering is a very serious one. And Jesus, the Liberator, understands all of this because he is the truth. And his thrust, or the thrust in his mission is therefore to strengthen spiritually in a godly manner the inward being that we are, the spiritual beings that we are, which we have lost sight of because we have allowed ourselves to be sucked into the system of illusions. We have become alienated from ourselves. We are strangers to ourselves. We do not know ourselves. And that's what Jesus said on the cross. Father, forgive, for they know not what they do. What is it that they know not? They do not know themselves. If they had the slightest idea who they were and what they really needed, they would not have done it. It's a pathetic thing. Very often we act with great valor, great courage, with great decisiveness in murderous or suicidal ignorance. So Jesus comes to make a big difference. He understands this plight which is universal, and he knows what we really need. It's not a more comfortable life. It's not better material circumstances that we need. It's not greater security for the future that we need. I'm an old man. I've reached a stage when security is of great importance. But I tell you, even today, in my old age, I can tell you, my need for security is nothing compared to my need to become the true human being that I have to, because my eternity rests on this and nothing else. Hence it is that Jesus came to be part of the human condition, as well as the light that leads us to our true spiritual destiny. Therefore, he came as the truth that sets us free. In him, we are free indeed. Hallelujah.